Ladies and gentlemen, the president keeps telling us that they are going to reform, they are going to stop stealing somehow, and they're going to actually work on the citizens of the state. But they never really seem to do that. He seems to be ramping up the rhetoric as we move towards the local government elections. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. Now, before we move on to the main stories, I just want to follow up on some videos that I've made, and if you haven't already watched, please go watch them. The first is around the protests that occurred in London. Now, one of the key reasons for Tommy Robinson's protests was the rise of mass immigration to the United Kingdom. And this in itself is something that really should be noted because the locals are unhappy with mass migration. And you would be forgiven for thinking why they're unhappy when you see Islamic politicians like Zahra Sultana, a daughter of Pakistani immigrants to the United Kingdom who was on the streets at the weekend, saying that she didn't actually want to see UK patriots protesting. In fact, she said she only wants to see asylum seekers. In fact, you can actually see that video right here.
Whose streets? Whose streets? Say it loud, say it clear.
Refugees are welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Refugees are welcome here.
We are here today with one clear message. Fascists, you are not welcome here. Refugees are welcome here.
Now, one of the other topics that we did cover was actually around the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And if you haven't already watched my videos on that, well, you really should. Now, a key point that is being raised following the assassination of Charlie Kirk is actually the calming of the rhetoric against political opponents. Now, this can be seen in the actual interview with CNN that John Fetterman did. Now, John Fetterman is actually a Democrat. And he said that Democrats should stop calling Trump an autocrat, don't force a government showdown, accept Trump's help on crime, stand with Israel against Islamism, and that according to him, Mamdani, that's the mayoral-elect of New York, doesn't actually reflect the party, that's the Democrat Party. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mamdani is he's a communist, to be frank, and he's a rather anti-Semitic one at that. So as I said, if you haven't already watched those videos, please go give them a watch. I really would appreciate that. Anyway, let's move on to the main stories of today. And the first one is actually a doozy. And that is that at a ANC councillors gathering, an ANC veteran bluntly told ANC councillors to stop stealing, reminding them that when they steal from government, they're stealing from the people. Now, Ramaphosa himself admitted that the best-run municipalities are DA-controlled, namely Cape Town and Stellenbosch, as examples that the ANC should learn from. This is a remarkable public admission that ANC-run municipalities are failing compared to their oppositions. Now, the ANC veteran at the weekend emphasized revolutionary morality, the idea that leaders must serve and sacrifice for the people instead of enriching themselves. And I must say, if the ANC really wants to progress forward, they need to kill the revolutionary whatever. It's all just a load of rubbish. But the irony is hard to miss. Seated just meters away from senior ANC leaders themselves are all tainted by corruption, which included Ramaphosa, Paul Mashatile, Gwede Matashe, and many others. Now, the ANC leadership is trying to project reform and integrity ahead of the local government elections, but the disconnect between rhetoric and reality is becoming rather glaring. Ramaphosa has himself said if the ANC does not reform and does not stop stealing and start delivering services, the ANC will die. And at this point in time, I'm going to say, well, the ANC is going to die then, isn't it? Because let's use some examples. And the rot starts at the head. Because as we can see, Ramaphosa's Phala Phala scandal just seems to keep going. Now, I must admit, the fact that Phala Phala has come back into everybody's psyche and back into the news caught me a bit by surprise. Because as you know, the infamous 2020 burglary at Ramaphosa's Phala Phala game farm, well, that was over 5 years ago now. Now, an employee has admitted to stashing $580,000 in cash under a couch, claiming that the farm safe was not secure enough. And apparently he placed golf bags on top of the cushions to hide it, which made it super secure. So the farm actually had a safe, but the couch was more secure because they put golf bags on top of it. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Now, the money came from a Sudanese businessman who allegedly paid in cash for 20 buffalo. That was 10 cows and 3 bills at 400,000 Rand each, which totaled 8 million Rand. Now, the transactions of the scale are normally processed by bank transfer. The use of physical dollars does raise questions of money laundering, undeclared foreign currency, and bypassing financial oversight. Now, apparently, according to the latest trial, Ramaphosa was informed of the hidden cash by his staff and allegedly told them that he would deal with it later. No action was taken, and weeks later the money was stolen and broken. Now, the accused, a self-professed diamond boy, and his siblings have all pleaded not guilty to theft, conspiracy, and money laundering. Now, cell phone records allegedly placed them at the scene, and unfortunately for the diamond boy, he flouted a lavish lifestyle with multiple luxury cars, jewelry, and holidays after the heist. So these individuals are currently being charged for the theft of the money or the break-in to Ramaphosa's property. But they do raise questions around the presidency himself. I mean, it's a bizarre choice to hide millions under a couch. And as you know, the metaphor of hiding money underneath the couch has now become a metaphor for Ramaphosa's presidency. Because as we've seen, Ramaphosa seems to keep burying uncomfortable truths out of sight until they explode into a scandal. Now, where we can see the very next scandal is actually from the next in line. So we go from the president to now the deputy president, because new revelations show that companies linked to the deputy president, Paul Mashatile's sons, received 91 million Rand in tenders for maintaining fire suppression systems at Gauteng hospitals, originally thought to be worth only 49 million Rand. The value of the contracts nearly doubled once full figures were released in provincial legislative responses. Now, two companies, supposedly competitors, shared staff, office space, and resources, effectively operating as one network. The payments covered a wide range of questionable expenses, from actual fire system maintenance to renting a fax machine. I don't know who uses a fax machine, which has raised doubts about the actual service delivery. Hospitals in Gauteng remain dangerously unprotected. Not one of the 37 public hospitals complies with occupational safety standards, with fire risks cited as the biggest danger. So despite being paid 91 million Rand, they actually haven't done anything. Now, what you can actually see here is that the contracts, along with the family links, do feed into the narrative that politically collected elites extract millions from the state while public services crumble. So let's actually move on then to actually talk about public services, because the next is moving on to Cyril Ramaphosa's defense minister, Angie, because news has come out that the Department of Defense has spent 110 million Rand on renting the St. George Hotel in Pretoria between 2022 and 2024 to house the South African National War College and Defence College. This is a day after all the wasteful expenditure came to light, where the South African government sent SANDF officers to Cuba to receive unaccredited training they couldn't even use here because the qualifications aren't recognized. But in any case, the Defence Minister, Angie, defended the expenditure, blaming the Department of Public Works. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Department of Public Works is run by Dean McPherson, a DA member, for failing to provide a suitable state-owned facility. Now, I find that rather rich, but anyway, let's look into it. So the breakdown of the costs are 61.7 million paid between February 2022 and March 2023, and 46 million paid between April 2023 and January 2024. Now, officials claim the landlord covered maintenance and utilities, but critics say that this was still grossly wasteful expenditure spending on a cash-strapped department. So you actually have to look at that and say 110 million, you probably could have bought the hotel for that. Now, in any case, the lease ended in 2024, which forced relocations of training commands back to Swanee facilities. So one has to ask the question as to why they were there in the first place, but we don't really know. Now, opposition parties slammed the deal, pointing out that the GNU has already wasted 282 million on ministerial travel budgets, with defense officials themselves racking up 20 million Rand in overseas trips to destinations like Cuba, Malaysia, Japan, Turkey, all the key allies of South Africa where we do nothing with. Now, this is being framed as yet another example of lavish government spending with little value for taxpayers. So let's move on then to the water minister, Penny, who admitted to Parliament that millions of rands have been wasted on water projects that were paid for but never completed. some dating back to 2016. Now, it's recently come to light that corrupt syndicates dubbed water mafias, I can't believe we have such a thing called water mafias, intimidate contractors, extort payments, and halt construction projects unless they pay bribes. Well, we've seen this in the construction mafia, so I suppose it's just extended through to the war firm. So I suppose it's just extended to what, the water mafia? But in any case, in a northwest province, projects funded through national infrastructure grants remain unfinished nearly a decade later. Costs have skyrocketed, and one water treatment plant originally budgeted at 30 million rand is now 24 million rand due to repeated delays and corruption. Now, Penny's department is now taking funds back from municipalities and directly appointing new implementing agents to finish stalled projects themselves. Meanwhile, Johannesburg residents endure multi-day water outages, often without notice, or water tankers provided. Aging pipes, leaks, and burst mains prevent reservoirs from filling to meet demand, and we've seen this in numerous areas, including in Nelson Mandela Bay, where the water just goes off for, I don't know, reasons, even though there isn't actually a water scarcity, and one can only conclude that it's either the water pipes or the plants themselves that are no longer able to provide the water to citizens of the state because it's all crumbling. Now, protests are erupting nationwide as communities demand urgent solutions to what has become one of the biggest service delivery failures in the country. As many people highlight, you can live without electricity, but you can't live without water. Now, Minister Penny admitted poor communication with municipalities worsens the crisis, leaving residents in the dark while politicians scramble to manage the optics. Because that's all these politicians do. They just want to scramble the optics and somehow convince people to continue to vote for them. Now, talking of Nelson Mandela Bay, you can actually see that right here in Nelson Mandela Bay, where the mayor, an ANC mayor, wrote directly to President Cyril Ramaphosa rejecting claims by the Nelson Mandela Bay Church Leaders Network that the metro is a political chaos and a circus. Now, according to the Bay's mayor, she accused church leaders of painting a false picture of dysfunction after a tense meeting with him. But you see, the problem is I live in Nelson Mandela Bay, and the church leaders are 100% correct. The mayor is useless, and the ANC is useless. We saw this at the weekend where the power went out, and they argued over whether or not the individuals were going to get overtime, which meant that the Bay was without power for 3 days, whilst the municipality argued over whether they're actually going to pay these people to go out and fix it. That's not a functioning municipality. As I said, water frequently goes off here. There are numerous instances on the Old Cape Road where all the traffic lights have all been mowed down by cars. Well, they're still down. We see repeatedly around the Bay where lights have all been cut down and the copper stolen from them. Is this a good functioning metro or a metro that's on collapse? What you can see is that this shows a growing tug of war between civil society and local government, with church is saying that, well, the city's collapsing, while the mayor insists that it's completely under control. And the fact that the mayor has escalated the matter to Cyril Ramaphosa suggests that she's under pressure and fears public narratives of chaos could destabilize ANC control in the metro. And it's going to. The ANC is going to lose control because everybody is platful. So going back to the main story of the day, Cyril Ramaphosa says the DA is the best run municipalities. Well, yeah, because they don't loot everything. And Cyril says that if we don't control the looting, well, we're going to collapse and die as a political party. And to that I say, well, the ANC needs to die. It's a rotten organization. There is nothing redeeming about it anymore. The reality is that Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC is far more corrupt than any other ANC in history. This is the apex of corruption, and the party needs to die. There is no reforming it. You can sit there and say, well, the local councillors shouldn't steal, but how can they not steal when the leadership, the president and the deputy president, the ministers are all involved in corruption scandals of their own? There is nobody even in the upper echelons of the ANC that is untouched by corruption allegations. They're all corrupt, so they all have to go. At some point in time, the sickness just needs to be cut out, and the sickness of the Republic is the ANC. In any case, that's just my views. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.
Young men, you need to have a destination in your life. If you are on a date and a young lady says, well, what do you do? And you're like, it's I kind of meander, and I go on DraftKings, and I own crypto, and I don't know. And loser, instead it should be, I'm studying this because of this. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to work for this person. I want to be able to make this much money by this period of time to provide for a family, and I don't care how hard it gets, but I'll provide for you and provide for the kids, and I'll be the protector and the covering over the family. Follow me because I'm going to lead us. That's what they want to hear. They want the confidence and the security that when life gets difficult and when life starts falling apart, that man will lead them towards security and stability. Because deep down, women have a very well-built and finely tuned, God-given instinct that they'll be able to tell in a man when the bullets start firing, is this guy going to protect me and protect my kids? And is he going to provide, or is he going to run for the hills? Go look to your grandfather's generation that stormed Normandy Beach, that built this nation, that started big businesses, that went on adventure. If the most important thing for you is just feeling good, you're going to end up miserable. But if the most important thing is doing good, you will end up purposeful.